Well, it's a great pleasure on GameFace to speak to one of the all-time greats of Australian Olympic history, who won a gold medal at the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul in the 400 metres hurdles. One of the great races, just got over the line, but she got over the line in a magnificent finish against Levitskaya of Russia. I'm speaking, of course, and she's been living on the Mornington Peninsula her entire life, so she's one of our own in Debbie Flintoff-King. Debbie, welcome to GameFace. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Nice to be here.
Well, you won that gold medal nearly 32 years ago to the day. Can you still remember every aspect of it?
Yes. I don't think it's something you'll ever forget. So, yeah, I could probably put myself in there and remember from when I got up in the morning to when I got home with the medal. So I could probably remember every bit of it.
It was a tough time leading up, 3 days before or a few days before you left to go to the Olympic Games. Your sister died and of course you weren't well either. How were you able to compartmentalise that tragedy in your life to get ready for such a big event like this?
I actually don't know how I did it. When she did pass away, I had a time trial the next day, and my husband said, "You don't have to do this time trial," and it just, something took over me. It was like I was waiting to grieve later, like she was supporting me to grieve later. So I did the time trial, and it was a wet, windy day, and it was the best race I'd ever run. So I don't know how you can put it down to what happens when you have tragedies like that, but it was like I was being helped. So it wasn't something that I thought, how am I going to do this? It was something more, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it well.
It appeared you and Phil, when you got to the Olympic Village in Seoul, that you were in your own little bubble together. You didn't eat breakfast with the rest of the team. You brought your own bread. You brought beautiful muesli, lots of lovely produce from the Mornington Peninsula, which we'll speak about shortly. How much did that help?
Well, the most important thing for me to stop my nerves was to try and have everything as if I was at home. So if I could assimilate my breakfast and everything that I needed to do to prepare myself, then I wouldn't get as nervous as, maybe I was apt to get, because I tended to have a very nervous nature, and it was something that I worked on repeatedly, probably 2 or 3 years before the Olympics, to try and help myself. So for Phil just basically said, we're going to have everything as if we were at home, which included, breakfast, which included my pillow that came with me, which included what time I would get up, what time I would do my pre-warm-up, that sort of thing. So I guess it was just trying to do exactly what I was used to doing 1,000 times before.
Was there great support, though, from the rest of the team? No doubt there would have been.
Well, there was great support in that they allowed me to do what I needed to do or wanted to do. They didn't sort of interfere and say, well, you must come here at this particular time. I did have a little bit of that in the trials. It was like, if you don't trial, you don't go. And at that time I was anemic. So that was in about March, and I really didn't want to run. But they didn't support me so much there. Anyway, I ran and then unfortunately immediately went back to bed. But no, at the Olympics, possibly because of what I had come up against with my sister, they were very supportive in what I needed to do to get ready.
And it was, I think, a couple of days after one of the biggest controversies in the history of the Olympic Games, Ben Johnson being disqualified after, of course, winning his gold medal. What was the atmosphere like around the Olympic Stadium, Debbie, regarding that? Was there still a feeling of surrealness, for want of a better expression? I know you're trying to compartmentalise and just concentrate on your race, but was it almost like an empty feeling because of what had happened?
Look, I have to say athletes are pretty selfish people, and they need to be selfish. So while they heard about it and thought, how a tragedy for a certain person, and this is really bad for the sport and blah, 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 it's a matter of, look, we need to get on with this. We can't think about this. We need to do our own thing. So in that respect, I think people went about doing their own thing. It wasn't like everyone was down and what are we going to do now? I guess it was still, we've got to do this job and we need to pick ourselves up and we need to carry on.
What did you learn from 84? I mean, at the start of that race, you fell over, unfortunately. Obviously, you must have been good friends with the starter because he called everyone back. Did you think it was all over then in 84?
I still don't really know what happened. All I know is that I fell out of the blocks. Now, how do you do that when you've trained for years and years for something? I don't know whether the starter held us too long, whether I was just so nervous that I didn't know what I was doing. And hence really working on my nerves for the next 4 years to the next Olympics. But yeah, that probably spurred me on because I knew that I was a better athlete than what I showed that day. I guess, unfortunately, you've got to wait another 4 years, and that's the sad thing about going to the Olympics. If you do something wrong, you've got to have to wait 4 years to do it again. But it helped me. It helped me to spur myself on, knowing that I was a better athlete than that, and that I could show everybody, including myself, what I could do over the next 4 years. So in that respect, it was probably good for me. But it was so, God, if anyone could die of stress, I reckon I would have died that day of stress.
So do you think you went out too quickly because the adrenaline was pumping? You were determined to get a good start after almost mucking it up the first time round, and as you said, you finished sixth because you probably ran out of petrol tickets. And how much did that prepare you for 4 years later to finish a lot better?
Yeah. Yes, so I ran out, like, as my husband described, like free beer. I literally just went out, and I was probably ahead about hurdle 5, and then I just slowly died because I had run too fast a race too soon. And the actual 400 hurdles, even though it's a sprint event, it is one of control. And it is one of still having something in the bank at the end of the race. And so when I ran out, my heart was beating so fast when he called us back. I probably would have been better off him not calling us back, because I just would have ran and chased everybody when I fell over in the first race. And he didn't need to turn it. He didn't need to call it back because I had actually fallen out of the blocks after the gun went. So I was very, very lucky for that to happen. And I think I definitely learnt from that for the next 4 years, because it enabled me to run a perfect race in Seoul. And when you look at the statistics that we were given, and you sort of work out how much between each hurdle you do, it was almost the most perfect race I could ever run. And even though I looked like I was coming home faster, I think everyone was just slowing down slower.
Oh, I think you're being a bit harsh. I've seen the race a few times over the last 24 hours, and I thought you were magnificent at the end. Now, we know, we've just spoken about Ben Johnson. We know the East Germans had a history, sadly, and it probably wasn't their fault, of taking performance-enhancing drugs in the 70s. You're up against two East Germans, Fiedler and Bush. Levitt Sky was one of the favourites from Russia. Were you confident, Debbie, that Fiedler and Bush were okay in regard to making sure that they hadn't been on performance-enhancing drugs, or that was out of your control as well?
Well, that's is that you can control what you can control and forget about what you can't. And that was the motto that I always followed. You know, if it was bad weather, you control what you can do.
Can you get a bit closer to...
Oh, sorry.
You're right.
So, are you right?
Yeah, we're right. Good.
Okay. So you control what you can, and you leave what you can't. And, you know, whether it's the weather, whether it's competition, whether it's your lane draw, whether it's how you're feeling, you just have to work with what you've got. So I knew 12 months before at the World Championships, Bush had won and I got second to her. So I knew she'd probably be the favourite. Fiedler's always been a good runner. And in fact, that same year, earlier on, I had run in Oslo, and I had got second between the two. And there was Bush, myself, and Fiedler. So I knew they were there. But once again, I didn't think about them. I know that sounds weird. I didn't sort of look at them and go, you know, oh, no, I've got to race them. I felt quite in control, even in the warm-up. When you finish your warm-up, you go into an area where you're left for about half an hour. And even in that going out to the stadium, I felt in control. And if anything, I felt as if people were copying me and what I was doing. So that gave me a little more strength as well.
What did you know about Levitt Sky? Did you know she'd go out quickly?
Well, in the semi-final, I beat her by exactly the same amount. Lots of people don't know that, but I beat her in the semi-final by 1/100th of a second as well. So I knew she went out fast, but I also knew that I had to run a controlled race. But what gave me a bit of comfort was out at the warm-up track when we were warming up for the final. She didn't even know how to put a hurdle down. And I looked at my husband and I thought, she is a real novice, which is fantastic for her. She was a good 400-metre runner, a 49-second 400-metre runner who had gone to hurdles. But I think she was a novice when it came to hurdles. And that was just one other thing that gave me a bit of strength. Okay, I'd been doing hurdles for, probably more than 10 years, maybe 15 years. And if I got over every hurdle faster than she did, and there's 10 hurdles, even if I improved 1/10 of a second at each hurdle, that's a whole second in the race. So I just had to really think about what I was doing over each hurdle and try and peg back what she had above me in the sprint.
You're a fair way behind, Bruce said during the call. You've got some work to do, as he said about Kathy Freeman, which we'll talk about in a second, 12 years later. What were you thinking at the halfway mark? You still felt confident?
Yes, I had a race to run, and my husband used to always give me little notes in my shoes before I went out to races. And he quite often said that I had to, now let me just think about this. I had to fight, and I had to flow, and I had to go fast. So that was sort of the rhythm around the race I had to do. So I had to work the first 150 metres. I had to flow the next 150 metres, and I had to go as fast as I could the last 100 metres or whatever. So it was in my mind. I was in a tunnel. I didn't even think about who was racing to the inside of me or to the outside of me. You're in a tunnel, and when you come to the 8th hurdle, you use everyone around you then to help pull you back. And that's basically what I did. I think I was about 4th or 5th at hurdle 8. And I just slowly pegged everybody back the last 100 because I felt like I was pulling them back towards me and getting strength from that.
Lane 5 is a pretty good lane. You're in the middle there. You must have been happy with that, or again, it didn't really matter?
Oh, well, I knew because I had run a really good semi-final, I would have 3, 4, 5 or 6. Yeah. 3 or 4 might have been that little bit better because you're in the side of everyone. Yes. But yeah, any one of those lanes is fine. So yeah, we always talk about having lucky lane 5.
And in the end, over the last hurdle, you've absolutely stormed home. Did you think you'd won it? As I said to you before we started this, I thought a bit like Bruce, not sure, not quite, don't think, not quite, which is a great line because he wasn't sure. I think most of us, I thought maybe you just missed out, but did you feel you'd done enough?
I did. And so that when I was turning around and they were flashing Lead of Sky, a gold medal on the screen, it was like, hang on a second, I think I won. And I really did. And I think an athlete knows when they've won. And my husband used to always put training partners ahead of me that I would have to peg back the last 50, 60 metres. So it was second nature for me to grab these people, pull them back to me and use the energy to get forward. So I felt as if I had done enough to get there. So to see, everyone's reaction and waiting for the photo finish, I just had to think, oh, well, let's just wait for the photo finish because I believe I have done enough to win.
Longest few minutes of your life, Debbie, waiting for that photo finish?
Yes, and it also robbed me of doing a victory lap. I never got the chance to do a victory lap, which I think when you've experienced one in say, Commonwealth Games or whatever, it's actually a lovely moment to be able to enjoy what you've done and have people applaud with what you've done and agree, that it was a great effort. And I never got to do that. So that was a bit of a shame.
Was it relief or was it delight when your name came up?
Relief. Definitely relief because, probably because of just the occasion in itself is something that puts a lot of expectation on you. But I had also put my own expectation on myself. So to have got second or third at that particular time, I wouldn't have been happy with. Maybe 6 months down the track, I might have thought, that was a great effort. But that day, I wasn't prepared to take anything but gold. And so to have got a silver by 1/100th of a second to me would have been a fail.
And would have that made you determined to go again 4 years later, or not?
Probably. Yes, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. I would have kept going, because knowing that I was so close but still not quite there, yeah, I probably would have kept going for another 4 years.
Now, Phil, of course, is your husband, he's your coach. It's an interesting dynamic, but it seemed to work. Why did it work?
It worked because whatever he said happened. It was like he would say to me, when I was first starting the 400 hurdles, he would say, okay, look, we're not going to win today, but we're going to do a personal best, and we're going to do this particular time. And within 0.2 of a second, I did that time. So it was a mutual respect that grew. And he told me, you know, whereas people say, oh, you're going to win, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. He was like, he would tell me when I was good enough to win, and he would also tell me when I wasn't good enough to win. And that in itself was like a stepping stone, you know, all the way up for him to sort of say, yes, you're good enough, you know, not quite yet, not quite yet, not quite yet. Yes, it's going to be now. So I guess the respect grew with him, and whatever he said, I just did, except for some of the sessions. I know when he told me some of the sessions, I used to have a bit of a cry knowing that the session was going to hurt, but I knew I was going to have to do it anyway. So it just made me feel better, feeling a bit sad for myself.
I couldn't ever imagine you, Debbie, storming off. You just seem to have such a nice disposition about you. Did that happen often when you're having an argument?
One time I remember my dad came with me to the track, and he timed my time trial, and he didn't time it properly. And my husband said to him, I think you better get on the other side of the fence, Les, because she's not going to be happy with that. And I came up to Dad and I said, what was the time, Dad? And he said, I'm so sorry, I missed it. And I said to him, doesn't matter, it's okay. And Phil looked at me as if to say, oh, you wouldn't say that to me, because I was sort of, I guess I was up and down, it just depended. But yes, I've always had a passive nature, and it was often up to Phil to rev me up, to get me going, more so, you know, than anything else. So sometimes I was so passive that he would say, you know, come on, you know, you've got to get aggressive. And I felt, well, I feel calm. I don't really need to get aggressive. I know what I have to do. So I guess it's just in my nature. But I do have flighty moments, yes.
Were you passive as a coach? You had Lauren Hewitt, who to me seems very similar to you. And then you had Jana Rawlinson, who, with the greatest respect to Jana, has achieved a lot in her life, is not similar to you, I would have thought.
Well, I didn't really have much to do with Jana, except that she lived with us for 12 months. So, right. You know, it was Phil that was doing all the coaching, and Phil has a lot of patience, always has. Yeah. So whoever he worked with, he had magic hands, and he was able to read the person's personality and probably work out what was best for them to win. And that's where his ability as a coach lied. It was not so much in the training, but I mean, he had great training ideas and had great variety, but it was in his way that he could cope or think about how the athletes think. And therefore he was able to put everything together and address the athlete the way they would bring the best out in them.
Well, she won 2 world championships. Looking back, a couple of injuries. Do you think cost her at least 1 Olympic gold?
100%. We were training with her she's a great athlete. She was a great athlete. She doesn't have, you know, you look at her and she walks in the room and she's exactly what you'd want an athlete to be. She's tall, she's muscly, just, you know, fantastic looking athlete. And when we were in Zurich and she was getting ready to run a race, and she had already done a time trial the week before and run an unofficial world record. And I was there doing it. So I was there timing it and Phil was coaching her. So we knew she was in great shape. And then she comes out in the warm-up and does her meniscus. And it was like, it was the worst feeling. It was just the worst feeling, because, you know, it was just knowing what an athlete would go through to sort of be in the shape she was in, and to go and do that. I don't think any of us slept all night. It was just one of those dreadful things. So, Yeah, she definitely was robbed of that, because there's no doubt that she could have won that. And I know it's hard to say, because you shouldn't say, you know, if only or whatever, but she certainly was ready to do really well.
Now, you lived on the Mornington Peninsula your whole life. You're a Murdoch girl. You're now living in Mornington. Why do you love the Mornington Peninsula, Debbie?
I think it's because I've always been someone, like, even when I won my gold medal, I got it and went back into my own little cubby hole. It was just, I've always liked to be laid back and in an area where, you know, I can go down the street and, well, I don't know if anyone recognises me or not, but I don't see it. I don't look around and go, oh, she's looking at me, she's looking at me. I just do my own thing, and everyone lets me do my own thing. So I like that. I like that about the peninsula. I also love it because I've lived down here since I was 11. My parents moved down to Frankston when I was 11. I then we stayed in Frankston for a while. I went to Murdoch. I then went to Mount Martha, and now in Mornington. And I think just the peninsula is a beautiful, beautiful place.
Where did you start hurdling, and where was the place you did most of your hurdling on the peninsula?
Well, I joined Frankston Athletic Club when I was 13. And I started off doing hurdles and long jump, and I got a silver medal at nationals for long jump. Then I went on to heptathlon, which I won an Australian title in heptathlon. And then which all along had hurdles in it. And then I just started to think of an event that I could specialise in. And the 400 hurdles was relatively new to the Olympics. So I chose that. And it wasn't till I was 20 that I had my first race in 400 hurdles. But I'd hurdled since I was, 13 or 12. So I'd hurdled for quite a while.
Was it intimidating the first time you did it? I mean, I've tried to do it and had absolutely no chance and suffered all sorts of bad injuries, Debbie. We won't go into that, but you look at it and think, oh, yeah, I can get over that. And then when you try and run it, you're no chance. What was it like the first time you were hurdling? Well,
the first time I did 400 hurdles, I actually fell over the last hurdle.
Right.
And I picked myself up and ran on to the end and, ran about 60 seconds or 61 seconds or something or other. So, you have your ups and downs. I've had bursitis of the kneecaps. You've had shin splints. I've had hamstrings. I've had thigh muscles, Achilles, So you have your moments, but hurdling, you can either hurdle or you can't. I really, really believe you're born with whether you can hurdle or not. You can make it better by training, but you've got to know how to sort of, you've got to have it in you, I think, how to actually hurdle, and then you can make it more smoothly and faster as you train. And I guess I was always a natural hurdler.
What's it mean to you, considering you've lived on the peninsula since you were 11, to have a statue there on the Mornington Peninsula?
Isn't that beautiful? I thought he was joking when he first told me.
Really?
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. So long after, I've won gold, and they're still going to do something like that. Yeah, that was beautiful. When I met Rob, who is organising it, he rang my mum and spoke to her and said, could you get Debbie to ring me? I don't know how he got my mum's number, but she rings me and says, now don't forget to ring this man. And no. And I go, we're always getting phone calls. Can Debbie do this? Can Debbie do that? So I didn't really want to ring him, but I did. And when he told me, I thought he was joking. And it's just beautiful. It's really lovely. And the fact that they're going to put it at the new track in Mornington, and that was where, unfortunately, my mum and dad both passed away last year, but they lived right next door to the track. So to have had that up at the track, and for my dad to have come and walked around the track and seen that every day would have been so beautiful. But I'm honoured. It's a lovely, lovely tribute.
How important were your parents to you growing up on the peninsula and encouraging you in your career?
My dad was my number one fan. He would do anything for me. And I can remember at the, I was 17 at the time, and it was at the national titles in QE2, and it was a rainy day, and he would do anything to help me. And so He's in the car drying off my socks. I couldn't get this spike out of my shoe. He went everywhere trying to find a spanner that would take this spike out of my shoe. He would just do anything and everything for me. So, and he was the one that got me into athletics anyway, because he was a publican and had a hotel in Frankston, and we lived upstairs for a few years. And he, to get me out of that lifestyle, took me to the athletic club at Frankston, and that's where I started. And I would have been there probably for about 8 years or so, and then I went to Glen Huntly Athletic Club, slightly better track, and so I've sort of always been on the peninsula. He's been my number one fan, and lots of the times, considering he got me into sport, lots of the times he was always there at the nationals or taking me training or there to help time with Phil. And yeah, he was always there. He was a big inspiration for me.
How do you think the sport's tracking at the moment, not only on the peninsula, but in Australia in general? Are you concerned about it?
Yes and no. Yes, because I think that a lot of the men in particular go to other sports like your basketballs or your football. I guess there's, you've got some women that will probably go to the netballs and the basketball. But so, yes, in that respect, there's so many less people than when I did. I can remember always having to line up for your 100 metres and running 45 minutes over time because there were so many people wanting to run those races. Whereas now, and I did, my children used to do athletics. If you weren't on time, you missed your race. And there was probably, 3 or 4 races in 200 metres in their age group. So, that's a bit sad. But look, every now and then we get, especially in women, we get some really great athletes, and I think that'll just continue. Yes, the population isn't there like it used to be, but you only need sort of 1 or 2 girls that are doing really well, and providing we've got the coaches to lead them, I think we'll always do well in female sport and track and field, because maybe the men have to be the breadwinners, I don't know. But yeah, even though the numbers have dropped down, I think that we still will always do well in it.
I think the numbers
that way I'm not worried.
I think the numbers dropped down, Debbie, after Little Ats. Little Ats are massive. My kids did Little Ats as well, and then they sort of go off and do other things, don't they? It's trying to keep them from 15 onwards, isn't it?
The hardest part is probably, I'd say, 13 to 16. Yeah. If you can keep them in the sport between 13 and 16 years, you're okay. But it's the same everywhere. My children did nippers, but only did 1 year of seniors. It's just... Maybe it's just distractions, or they want to try different sports, which isn't such a bad thing, trying different sports. I think team sports are a must for everybody, just to sort of realise what you've got to do in a team rather than individual sport like track is. So it's not such a bad thing that they may go away for a few years and try a team sport like your netballs or your basketball or your football. But let's just hope that maybe they come back into it if they've got the talent to, to do well in that. But having said that, you've got to have the right coaches, and that's always hard to find. You've got to have a coach like Phil that you can work with, and he knows your nature. Whoops, what happened there? He knows your personality. He knows you don't just coach someone and think everyone's coached the same. Everybody's an individual, and I think that's important.
One more question about your dad. Graham Hughes, who was hosting the Channel 10 coverage at the time that you won that race in 1988, described you as having a heart like Phar Lap. How did you feel about that comment?
That's typical of Dad. That's so Dad. Look, I think it was because I didn't give up, having been through what most people probably would give up. It's a good excuse. My sister's passed away. I'm sick. I'm going to give up. I can't be bothered. I guess that may have, decided between me and other people that I didn't give up. And I've always, made sure that in my life I've said to people, the one thing, whatever you do, don't give up. And no matter what you're faced with, if you can keep fighting, you never know when it's just around the corner, when the finish line is. So I'm always saying that to people. You don't give up. Don't give up. You know, it's not in my attitude to give up. So I try and push that into other people. You know, don't give up. So that'd be one thing, and that's probably what he was playing at. That I just kept going and going and going and going until I got there.
Before I let you go, and I really appreciate your time, can I fast forward from 88 to 2000? What was that like, taking the torch around the Olympic Stadium? How special was that?
That was fantastic. And that was so good because you had the feeling of being able to do something that was fun, enjoyable, in front of everyone, and wasn't stressful. It was just, I had the best leg. I mean, Kathy would have had a bit of anxiety and everything, being actually lighting the flame. I had the best leg because I ran down the centre of the athletes and gave it to Kathy. So it was just fantastic. It was one of those things that you can honestly say, I can't wait till this happens. You know, where there's other things in life like Olympic finals where you think, I can't wait till this is over.
Yeah.
So, it was a great feeling, and I couldn't wait to do it.
I suppose when they asked you, as you said, you couldn't wait to get on that plane, it must have been a great honour. And I also thought, Debbie, one of the great things was the sisterhood of champion female Australian athletes. You're all there, arm in arm. I think you had your arm around Raylene, and Shane Gould was there, Glenys Nunn was there, two of the all-time greats no longer with us, Shirley and Betty, and obviously Dawn Fraser. I mean, that was a huge moment watching you all there, almost like, if I dare say, expectant mothers watching Kathy light the flame, even though, of course, there was problems with it, which we all didn't probably know at the time.
No, that's right. And look, it wasn't exactly age decided, but it was almost like coming down. And here I am passing to Kathy, who's going to carry it on. And it was a great choice. You know, she's a lovely, lovely person. And I couldn't have thought of anyone better than to light the flag. But I also know how much pressure she would have been under. And she stood up for it. She did it and more. She got sick. She was up, you know, when we were passing it, it was like midnight, and she let me know the next day she was still there till 2 or 3 in the morning because they couldn't get it to work. You know, here she is having an Olympic race a week or so later. She got sick, so she's on antibiotics. You know, that would have been so much stress to be under all that. And she pulled it off. And what a great choice. Really good.
Were you nervous for her in the night of the race? I think everyone else was.
Oh, the night of the race was amazing. We were fortunate enough to have tickets, and it was so good. It was just, the atmosphere was amazing. The atmosphere was amazing, and everyone's on their feet. And I'm sure we helped her. I'm sure everybody helped her. But I don't think I've ever, since then or later, heard such a loud crowd cheering for one particular person. And the atmosphere was electric. It was great.
Debbie, I really appreciate your time. Obviously, you've got a great lifestyle down in the Mornington Peninsula. For people that want to go down there and live, what's one thing that you like about the peninsula more than anything else?
The beach.
The beach?
I'd say the beach, but also it's like a country town. I mean, yes, it gets busy over summer, but it's such a nice area just to walk. There's beautiful walks. There's beautiful places to run. There's good shops. There's great restaurants. There's wineries. Who wouldn't want to live down this way? I guess the only thing is the winter weather. Yes. But then, you need variety. So it's seriously, and you're only an hour away from town. You're only an hour away from the city. So who wouldn't want to live down this way? It's just wonderful.
And you're still staying fit, I believe, doing everything.
Yes, I teach yoga
Wow.
3 times a week. I'm doing it online at the moment because of obvious reasons. I do weights 3 times a week. I don't so much run so much. We walk a lot every day because we've got beautiful walks around here. Yep. But when we get to the stairs, we tend to run up the stairs. So, yeah, I'm keeping fit. I would do something 6 days a week.
So the body's hasn't got any long-term injuries that a lot of elite sports people tend to have?
I did have my meniscus fixed, and that was from running. The final straw of that was running on sand, so I don't run on sand anymore, but it's fully recovered. And I think probably because of the yoga. When I was talking to you about Bush when I ran against her at the World Championships in 1987. When I got second there, I started to think, what do I need to do to win? Yeah. And two areas I needed to improve on were flexibility and being nervous, getting nervous easily. I had that type of A-type personality that tended to get, nervous the night before, couldn't eat properly because I was so nervous. So I had to work on two areas. And so I took up yoga and I did meditation. And they were the two areas in my life that I've continued doing until this day. And I'm sure that's helped me with all the injuries or lack of injuries.
And for people out there, of course, going through ISO, mental health's a big issue, Debbie, as you would be aware of. You would recommend things like yoga, meditation, mindfulness?
I couldn't think of anything better to do. And while people might be a bit put off by the word meditation, even if you could just sit twice a day for 3 minutes, close your eyes and just think about your breathing, slow your breathing down. Even that's going to help. It's going to help you reset, recharge, and feel better in yourself. Yes, so things like that I couldn't recommend more enough. To do yoga for flexibility and back, for your back, and also the meditation just for mind fitness is wonderful.
Well, I really appreciate your time. This has been a real highlight of mine. When I was able to get hold of you the other day, I've been like a little boy in a candy shop in the last couple of days, realising I was going to speak to the great Debbie Flintoff-King. I've really enjoyed the last 40 minutes. It's been absolutely fantastic. You're one of the greats of Australian sport, and I really appreciate you joining us on GameFace. Debbie, it's been fantastic.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me. It was fun.